Every now and then, I look at a game in the playthrough part while I'm still setting it up because maybe setup's really tough or something. In this case, setup's not easy, but that's just, it's not easy for an XX game. It's about on the size of, hey, a massive war game, especially since I have to punch all the tiles instead of just sorting them. But anyway, it's understandable and everything. But I had a couple of observations to make. And I see I'm not actually done. I forgot this tile sheet I have to take care of. The first one is about some of the track. First of all, we have these, look at that. Brown cities with just one dot. Not a lot of track coming out of them. And then likewise, gray cities with just one dot. Wow. What's up with that? Yeah. You lay track, and it's actually your track. And if somebody wants to use it, obviously they can use the common track between cities and stuff. But if they want to use your city, they're going to have to, or use your track, they're going to have to kind of curve around your city and break into it. I like that. Most games can't afford that, but there's so much space on this one that I think cities being more accurately represented in terms of the right-of-ways and everything, I think is a little better. Now, not all cities are that way, of course. Your Y cities each have 2 dots, and that's right from the green tiles, just like in most XX games. And then your metropolises go up to 3 dots. And I don't know what they start out as. It depends on the metropolis. Paris, for example, that's going to be one of these suckers where, it's divided up. All right. Another thing had to do with a rule that I didn't tell you, which is when you go up to brown track, if you're looking at a city or town, I think you have to put, maybe it's a double city or town. I'll look this up a little later. Or a double town or city. I think you have to put a tile that has the maximum number of connections possible in the space. This is one of the gripes that I had about, I think it was 1844 in particular, but it may have been 54 as well. But a number of games, which is, oh look, I got these gray Y cities, and some of them are special Ks, some of them aren't. I could use, the special Ks in an open space, and that deprives somebody who needs these tiles from using them, and then also deprives people entrance into my city. Okay, here's another thing. These damn plano boxes. I didn't buy them. The original owner of the game, look at this, provided them for me. He had bought them for the game. They had been suggested, and he decided to throw them in to the deal. But they work fine over here. They don't have quite enough of these little plastics to fill every slot. Okay, that's fine. Compared to this kind of thing, well, this kind of thing's fixed. At least I have some flexibility how I lay out my boxes. But the top row just doesn't stay in. And this one's a little better. This one's been shut for a while. I think once they're shut, they'll wedge in and force those to sit. Okay. Oh, there was something else. I don't remember what. But yeah, normally I wouldn't use a plano box or anything like that. Counter trays maybe, and counter trays might have worked here, but man, there's just so many hexes, so many track tiles, and they're so small that this is going to make life easier. I can just pass the box or carry the box around as I'm laying the track. I don't have to have long reaches all the time. I can move it around as I need it and everything. So I think that's going to work out as an overall win. It may be overkill when I'm getting to the browns. Not so much with the greens. There's still a lot of track there. But man, with the yellow, I really need it. Look at these piles of track. And I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I mean, look at this map, right? You look at it and say, oh, there's a lot of track here. Yeah, there is, but there's also a lot of space to put that track in. and a lot of companies to be building track. And we'll see. Because it looks like extreme overkill at this point. But, you know, most XX maps get pretty filled up with track. And if this does, that's going to be pushing the limits, I'd guess. So I've decided to go with a 7-player game, 4 players on this side of the table, 3 players here. Obviously, I'm going to do my normal counterclockwise movement. We got the tiles that are worth connecting to on the board. I noticed one that has probably an error. Rotterdam here should have a $30 water penalty on it. You can see like Strasbourg has one. And it's not written on there. We'll see. I may screw that up one way or the other. Either way, I can live with the answer. Better than looking for it. Just, you know, do I remember it or not, right? You can see things are a little crowded over here. They're not going to remain that way. Once the initial offering is dealt with, there'll be space for me to move the track tiles and clear things off of the locomotive work, stock market, and such not. But as of right now, I need to dispose of that. And now it's time to start the bidding. And good Lord, I got no idea. I'm about ready to start. But the designer, you know, obviously has expressed his distaste for paper money, and that's understood, and kind of says, hey, you really shouldn't use this stuff, but we include it in the game anyway. But you know, you'd think they'd do a better job than making colors that are so similar. They may have too many denominations. That, you know, I understand the desire at this point now for having 2s and 200s, but if you can't get a color mix that is distinguishable easily, I think it's a pretty bad idea to do them. Anyway, that's one problem. But the bigger problem is, as a new player facing this portfolio, what the hell is worth what? You know, right? I think in general, minors are probably pretty good. Privates, they're not 1830 privates. They're more like 1835 privates, in the sense that, yeah, they have their revenue, they have special abilities which are of great interest, but you're not going to be able to dump them into a corporation and get a ton of money off of it. In fact, I don't think we're going to see much raping and dumping at all in this game, just by the nature of it and from what we saw from 18EU, although there are a lot more companies available, right? But then there's these, which seem almost worthless, but they're not exactly. They might be the most valuable thing out there, at least the first one might be, or, you know, the first or second or whatever. Because there's places on the map that are going to be more important, more valuable to start a regional company than anywhere else. Spain comes to mind with 3 of these, you know, quick cash influxes. Now, do you want these right away? Well, I don't know, but they're probably going to get used right away anyway. See, as the game goes on, they become more valuable, but, you know, some nice extra money early on isn't a bad idea either, especially if you're, you know, competing with someone else. Although there's only 2 companies, no, there's 3 companies in Spain. Okay. Where else might there be a lot of interest from that? I can't see anywhere else where you really jump in and say, yeah, I would like that money. Although the ones down here are worth more, especially the ones deep in the kind of hard to reach areas are worth more. Palmero is worth more. Caligari is worth more. They're willing to pay a fair amount to get you hooked up. Salzburg's worth a fair amount, but you got to pay 30 to hook it up. And some of these others are not worth the hookup cost, but, you know, they might be important track. Now, there's also sort of an obvious, wow, you know, I mean, London is going to be a good place. Up here is going to be good. Probably Paris is going to be wealthy. But especially the London and North England, that looks like there's some pretty good little runs up there that might allow you to run a regional for a long time on good money. So, you know, there might be railways that are really, really important and valuable to start with. And unfortunately, yeah, this is an exploration, but unfortunately, I don't know those at this point. Likewise, I don't have a real grasp on what all these miners do. And that's a big part of why I'm playing. So I'm going to kind of randomize it, but it's tough. You know, first thing off, hey, get something cheap with no problem, you know. But if there are better things out there, you want to put your bids out there. I'm going to use number markers, I think, from here for my bidding, as opposed to the game kind of suggests, hey, grab a railways markers and use those for your bids. And I would have never thought of that, except that apparently that's become enough of a habit. Some of the guys I play with brought that from other groups, etc. So I think that's a good idea when you don't have, you know, numbered tokens or something around. So the game provides you with enough that you can put your bids down. All right, yeah, I'm dragging my feet to try to avoid getting started, aren't I? Okay, so I'm going to assume the valuations, placements, etc. are all pretty reasonable. I'm going to roll a 30-sider, something I don't get to do very often, to choose where he's going to go. Now, I don't think everything's worth bidding on. Notably, there are 10 of these, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, I think. So 22, including the miners, that puts me to, say, 23, 24. I don't want to give another number here. That gives me 6 more to play with. Those other 6, I haven't identified yet what I think are best, but I'll probably aim for a miner, and I'll consider the miners if I roll in that zone, and the privates, and take what looks like the best and drop a bid on it. It still will be pretty uninformed, and certainly rolling a die is as well. So unfortunately, I got 25, which means that process is exactly what I'm going to go through. Knowing the values, I'll tell you, this green junction mercantile looks really valuable. It adds a 20-pound token to the miners' train routes, and then this can be added to the major as well. It eventually boosts up to a plus 40. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to open that up at the 120 that, you know, you have to, that's the minimum bid. Again, I have no reasons to fiddle around and try to guess bids. So player 2, I'll go with 24. He's going to open up a bid on the $20 concession. Now this is basically saying I'm more interested in what regional railway I can start. He may be interested in starting one of his miners right early, but you know, it's probably more important to get your pick of these than starting a miner with one of those. So now we go to player 3, and this is going to take a long time, and I'm not going to roll through it all. Player 3 puts a bid in on this one with the Pullmans, which doesn't look terribly exciting to me. It's some extra revenue for the miner or the company that owns it, but that's okay. Player 4 goes to 12, 13, 14, 15, the White Peak Mountain, which gives a reduction on building through mountain areas. That could be very useful, say in Spain, where there's some hookups that look exciting right now. Could also be useful if you want to take one of the Austrian railways or something like that. Player 5. I'm hoping to see the packet fall, but you know, 14, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Player 5 is going to bid here. That puts him up to 125 on there. And we'll step away, come to where things get interesting again. You can see I'm just kind of randomly placing these, but again, I don't know how good any of these are. This one has a lot of words. This is the one that boosts a train. That's pretty valuable too. See one kind of iffy choice here. The guy who went with the White Mountain Peak. This guy made a good choice. One is the Mercantile, which raises a city. The other one he took was the Krasny Estrella, which adds train. Between the two, he can, really make a nice run or something. I don't know. Anyway, but this guy took the White Mountain, the White Peak Mountain, and the Great Western Steamship. The steamship helps you with moving overseas. The White Peak Mountains helps you building track through rough terrain. I guess it could be useful in conjunction here or something. But here's what's really, and it could be interesting over in Spain, because Spain's not that far from New York. Actually, New York's not all that far away. Anyway, it's as close to Spain or France or England, but it's really not all that far. It's only two sea areas. Which, does the steamship give you 2? Eventually does give you 2 for free, so it becomes an appealing option there. Anyway, the thing is that I'm not seeing too much synergy between these two, but I'm not going to step in and intervene here and say, no, he doesn't want that, because they both do look interesting. He may not get them both. At some point or another, everybody's going to kind of run out of money, and I'll have to calculate out, hey, how much have you bid exactly? I haven't been putting the money aside, but unless things start to fall, we're going to get into a position where, well, people kind of have to make things fall. And that does make things kind of complex. I might have to write out how much money each person's actually bid, which I don't like to do. But yeah, finding that synergy is easier in most of the XX games, because they have, maybe 6, 8 private companies, maybe 6 minors and a few privates and whatever. And you can just kind of look on the board and understand what their few abilities are. This one gives you such a humongous scope of different things that you can do that it's just not obvious how you want to tie things together. You could certainly come up with a plan or a B plan or something like that. And I could have written out plans to begin with, and then had the companies kind of try to follow those with some randomness applied in the plans instead. But as this is my first attempt to really take a look at it, if I end up with a bad combination, sometimes that happens even if you know what you're doing. I know in my 1854 game, when I played it opposed, I ended up getting exactly what I did not want, and it worked out fine, Pair 5 picks up the first thing off of here, just off the top, boom. Now, unlike 1835, that doesn't open up, like the first element in the row below it. That's a mechanism meant to allow you to always have a choice in 1835, other than do you want something or not. In this, you've got the bidding opportunity, so now somebody else has to buy this second one in order to get the revenue from them. This guy just decided, you know what, let's see what happens. I don't know why. He's got one bid in on one thing. It's not like he particularly wants to trigger this, but it's my randomness, the little random algorithm I have running here. That's what it's going to generate. The packet's getting pretty full of bids at this point. Let's take a look and make sure that we're still within our money. So player 7 here bid 20 on this, 125, another 120. It's 245, 265, 385. And he's kind of one of the bigger hitters here. Now we have $775, so we're not really close yet to having to make those checks too deeply, but I just wanted to get an idea. And some of these seem to be, I mean, the placements are just kind of random, but like everybody deciding the wagon, the Pullman cars are going to be a really valuable minor railway. They look like about the least valuable, which is why they're so deep in the packet, I guess. Nearly everything drops. Player 4 just bought this, but it's only nearly, which is to say there's some stops on the way. Like, there's bids on all the higher end stuff, but this is where we're going to break. But we've got a couple of competitive auctions going here. For some reason or another, player 4 took that. Player 4's got a couple of uncontested bids on things that he really likes. Let's see, seems like a good time to break it. He actually just rolled that randomly, but that's okay. Into my random bidding, not the initial bids on the auction, but when we get to the bidding, I don't know what the value of these things are. This is I know what their abilities are, or I look them up, like the Branton Engineers, which has all kinds of cool stuff. This one gives you one free token, which then closes it out, but I'm not sure. I think whenever you use the ability, it closes it out. How big a deal is that? It could be useful at some point in the game. It also gives a revenue, but how much is this worth, right? It's hard to tell, but looking at just the revenue, etc., people are unwilling to go above 50 with it. There's a reluctance there, so I kind of have the normal odd-even chances of upping a bid with that. And we got most of the privates disposed of at this point. A bunch of them waited over here. Player 3 has a whole bunch of them. There's kind of I don't know what the fuck they do, because again, after a couple of plays, you might start getting a feeling for what you want to have or not. But I think anytime you walk into this, even when you're focusing more on, what can I do? You're going to end up with this kind of confusion facing this many special little minors and privates going on. Over here, this guy, Swift Metropolitan, which is not a bad thing. It allows you to keep that 2+2 train longer. Is sort of the bottleneck at this point. I'm putting these guys into the offering now because honestly, these give you a jump on things. You kind of want to be able to do them. If you've got a minor, you kind of want to get it started early. If you don't have a minor, you want to get a regional started early, assuming you have cash for it. So it seems worth picking them up. So now they're kind of becoming more of a biddable option. If we had not gotten a bottleneck, these probably would have just all gone. Although some players might have said, well, now, wait, I have nothing to take advantage of it. I've spent a lot of money and have no minors, I guess. I don't know. 2, who doesn't have a whole lot of holdings, bought the Swift. Priority is going to be sitting here, therefore. And that's going to cause all the minors to fall. The first of the minors to fall was the Silver Banner Line. These were just all bid at, pretty close to minimum. Some of them obviously could go higher. The go higher is a hard choice for me. So sometimes a person would, in 1835 or something, would bid way over in order to get extra operating cash in their company. You can't go over 180 on these suckers, though. So you're not going to have, enough money to really float a 3 train for yourself right away off that. But it gets you a jump towards that 3 train. And how much that's worth, man, I have no idea. That's the problem. Is without this exploration game, I'm not going to know that. So everybody's just kind of, nobody's thrown in, yeah, I'm going to put 180 on here because I want that. And if you do that, you more or less chase everybody off, because unless you know, they want to waste money on it. When you put the 180, the extra money doesn't go in the treasury after that. So far, the initial bids on these miners, or the final bids on these miners, have not ended up as high as I would normally expect. I'd normally expect them maybe not to get to the 180, but to be a little bit more challenging. A number of them have gone around 130, 125, whatever. This one obviously is going to have some more starting capital because the 125, 30, 135, and it's with so many players involved, and it's probably going to go up a little bit from there. But it's kind of, I think my bidding strategy or randomizer for bidding strategy is a little off, because my knowledge of miners in most games is they're well worth having. So are privates, etc. But the miners are kind of the last chance of something like that. But we'll see. Just know that, you know, a number of these players, though, are getting them at face value, which is just a steal, right? We saw the packet probably collapse a little too early in terms of some of these just being available for way too little money. But that's something to realize with this play is, you know, if I was sitting there at the table, I would not, and had a bid in on something, I would not let it go for 125 or 130. And I don't know if it would go up to 180, but it would probably hit at least 140 before I backed out of it. The only way it could happen the way I played this out, but this sucker went for 170. If you got to the 180, people would start saying, yeah, you know, I don't think it's worth making the roll. It'll drop the chances. But anyway, everybody has some huge expectations for it. I don't know why. Then I started allocating the already bid on concessions, which cleared out the first three. And now we got the fourth one, which can be bought for only $10. Player 2 has priority on it. He could easily get it. The question he has, though, is how worth it is it, right? He has no miner to float, so he doesn't need it for a miner to get a jump with that. However, he could get a couple of regionals. He's got one concession already for a regional, and it's time to start looking at the par values here. So remember, the President's Certificate of the regional costs 2, as you would expect of these. Well, the highest par is $90. I could grab presidencies of 2 of those, right, at 180 each, which would be 360. So I think I can afford to pay $10 on a second concession. I probably won't get a third one. I don't know how they're going to fall, but I think I'm one of the few people who might not really need them, but I can see a value to it. I'm not getting confused. I may have said player 2 here, and there may have been a player 2 counter on here, which would make sense, except I think player 2 actually skipped one of their turns for, you know, just due to an accident, really. Because they don't have a lot of stock holding, or a lot of certificates that they grabbed, whereas this guy managed to successfully grab 4. But look, player 1 also grabbed 4. I think player 2, I think I did the right thing in terms of counters. It doesn't really matter too much. Anyway, the next option to buy one goes here. He almost certainly wants one with a bunch of miners, all of which are just aching to get started. And the last of the $10 ones goes, this guy had put a bid on a $0 one, so he gets it for free. And now the rest are free. And sometimes if somebody offers you something for free, you have to wonder, well, is it worth anything? But in this case, these are worth something no matter what. You want to have these. Obviously this guy actually wants one, so there's no problem with that. But this guy over here, I'm not sure if he has, he has enough capital to start a company anyway, so he does want it. But even if he didn't have the capital to start a regional, he would still want it because he could set the par value for one of the regionals for whatever reason, you know, to some value that somehow he thinks might help him. But probably more importantly, he'll be depriving someone else of the opportunity to actually use their concession. Now we'll move priority over here, but that's not going to matter too much because now we're going to enter into the concessions round. So the player who picked up the number 1 concession has the next option. He's got the option to either float one of his miners, which he can do by picking up one of these track rights and putting it on the miner, or he can start one of the regional railways. And this is a really tough call because I'm already invested in these miners. I'd like them to be good, right? I'd like to choose a great starting location for them. But on the other hand, I'd also kind of like to be able to pick a good and early running regional. I think because I have 2 miners and 2 concessions, I'm going to fire off one of my miners first. So let me look at the money that I've got on these. This one has £5 extra. So it's the one that can be used. Oh no, it has more than that. This is the monster, right? Wow, wait a minute. I thought this was the one that went for a huge amount of money. Oh, 50, yeah, 170 pounds. So this one's the most likely to have 2 trains running, and it's the one I'd like to trigger off. Now comes a really hard decision, because wherever I take my track rights is kind of useful here. Now I can't, if I recall correctly, it's hard to remember everything, but I can't start in a metropolis. Right, which means I will not be allowed to start here in Madrid. In addition, all the miners, all the regional companies are out there, which means I can't start in the homes of any of them. Once they've been removed, and remember one of the options with these concessions is to remove them. If I had a couple in a row, I might do that. Once they've been removed, actually I don't know if I can use a concession for that. Let's see. No. That's a little later. But once they've been removed, I might be able to grab one of their spaces, which could be kind of cool. So, Valencia is very interesting. I've got some additional cash I could grab there. I've already got additional cash on this miner. There's something appealing about starting someplace like that. What are my special abilities? Gray Locomotive Works. I'm going to be able to get trains cheaper. So this guy is actually the one I'd like to have buying the trains. Unfortunately, I have trouble transferring trains between miners just because I think it's not until the 3 trains come out that you can start transferring trains, and I'm not even sure if miners can do it. I'm pretty sure, I think they can, but that's something I'd have to look up at the time. But that's appealing, and this is a nice big money place that doesn't cost much. So you know what? I think I want to start my company. Which one? Which one? Well, I can run more than one train conceivably. Although this one, this is painful. Because this uses up one of my train runs. So I couldn't run a 2 train between these 2 using this port unless what? I'm not sure. Gonna have to look that up because I think the port token provides some benefit there. It does. I'm not sure why there's a penalty here, because if you're coming off here, you don't have a port token. So going from here to here is going to cost you a city hit. But going from here to here would not. So, should we start our wagons or our locomotive works? There. Locomotive works, obviously, it's going to get more money. But I already have, I mean, whoever gets here gets a pile of cash. But the question is, you know, is it better for me to have the company that already has a pile of cash on it, an extra few bucks, or is that 10% more important? I'm going to go with this one just because I think that's best. So I need to grab a Spanish track rights. Is this the best thing to do? You know, damned if I know, right? And here we go with this. It's going to cost me £10 to build my first dot, which is a pretty good deal, right? And I get that first dot over here in Valencia, and I get the coveted #1 position in the regional minor offering. And I'll turn this in. I'm going to need to return some, but I don't know if it's all of these 2+2s to that. I have to do a count to make sure how many. I know that I didn't have enough for all of them without the concessions, but I know there are also extra trains available to the game, so I'm not sure which pile we have there. So that's the first concession. Now we go to the second concession, and that's this guy over here. Now he has no miners to kick off. He's going to want to start 2 regional companies, really, with the second and fourth, and I want to think about synergy there. I'm making something of a guess here. Geez. Free track to Rotterdam. Well, I'll stick with what I have because that's my second choice anyway, and maybe I'll get a shot to build it. I'm putting $180 to buy the GWR. Track rights are guaranteed on this. I have to spend 40 of that bucks. The same track rights as if I buy it here. I get it with the regional, right? And I leave 1 token there. I get 2 shares of the GWR. And you can see a lot of time while I'm on video, if I do it all here, is going to be this way. I'm going to put it at the $90 par over here. It's a minor, sorry, over here. And it's a minor, so it doesn't go on the stock market yet. But that cash is there, and eventually it's going to go up to $120 par when it floats as a major, which will happen, I believe. What's nice about the $90 par, with the money I have, I'm able to buy 3 shares of this and 3 shares of my other company. I wish I had a higher par perhaps, but you know, hey, this is what I have right now. And I believe I leave those in there for now. I don't think I have to move them. They don't go to the corporate treasury yet, for whatever reason. Okay. So that's the second float, right? Let's see. Let's see if I'm missing something. And I'm sorry that, you know, I'm going through this in such detail, but I don't know what else value there is to my videos if I don't. So we go to 9.2. And that's all that happens there. Now, our third one is over here. Now, he has also 2 minors. He has 3 concessions. He has to make a consideration of whether he wants to, use his best concession on starting a regional, or use that concession on starting the minors. The minors are a little bit more flexible, sort of. I've got some ideas with this guy over here. Those ideas involve, okay, this thing just gives me cash, I believe. So it's not that big a deal. I can put it wherever the hell I like. But this one likes traveling across rivers. Which leads me to say, well, where are there lots of rivers? Obviously the Rhineland area has a significant river presence, but probably the biggest is over here in the Pripyat marshes and along the Don, etc. So that's probably, well, wait, do these only count at 45 or higher? Yeah, it looks like it's any. And that gives me extra track placements as well, as long as I'm in the river areas. That makes things kind of interesting here. Now, there are very valuable patronage tiles, is the right word, down in here. I probably can't make this one before everyone else could, but I might be the only person to make it to Sofia, which makes this particularly interesting. I don't know if it's terribly interesting to anyone other than me, though. Then again, the track over here, which the major or the regional, which I might want to hook it up to, also doesn't look terribly attractive to anyone, I suspect, except me. It's not that it's in a bad location. And in fact, this might be a better regional, except this one's on a Y city. It's kind of close to a couple of valuable red zones, or semi-valuable red zones, in what's kind of a sparsely populated area. The Russian track zones are very cheap. Their track rights, I start off, with a cheap token cost, and then I also get a percentage off on the builds there. So that's kind of neat, but maybe what I want to do, even though I've got a synergy defined there that I kind of like, is say, well, if somebody else grabs that, that's fine. Let's see what I can do for the Vermilion that is kind of rich. Now here it's more problematic because, the whole board is open, if I'm talking about that. What are the values up here in North Sweden? That's kind of nice too. And there's waterways up there. Ooh. Wow. And the Norwegian coast is even richer at the end. And that's actually, that's too far from New York to be able to get to. But that's a nice city. Now, if we consider the gray tracks and such not, those I think generally go up to 60s, but our big metropolis tracks are in the same realm as the richer red zones. So, there's a lot of money here. Jeez. I just don't know, It's a hard decision what I'm looking at. This is a Y space, so those are pretty common. Rotterdam pays for itself. Salzburg, not quite. I'm trying to find some place that's just so good that I don't need the synergy for it, for that other company. And I'm not quite sure what that would apply to. I mean, obviously, somewhere in England would be quite rich. I could grab London itself, right? Now, London's a metropolis. Birmingham's a metropolis. So there really isn't anything down here I could take. I could take Lille, and that would get me a shot into there. I don't have that bridging train, but I could very quickly get a dot over in London, which is probably not bad at all. So I think that's what I'm going to do with the Vermilion Seal Couriers. And I'll fire off this to start them there. Although Lille has fallen, and that would have been my preferred place for a miner if I had one, but I don't, I'm using my 4th concession to create the Belgian regional. You can't expect Lille not to be taken, I guess. I'm assuming it's worth something. And I'm not sure that these should have majors associated with them. I'm going to look to see if I'm supposed to have... Yeah, I've got to have this because of the token there and everything. So we just used the same card, I guess, for the minor or major. Yeah, here's the minor up here. The major's down below. Okay. So that's where we are with them. And now the 5th one is an interesting choice. And I'm stopping and starting all the time. But he's got 3 minor companies. A concession. He'd like to get one of these started. I'm already invested in them, right? But then there's I probably have enough money for one of these anyway. And I do. I have, $295. That could buy me 3 shares of one of those, even though I have these 3 miners here. So that's where things get kind of tough is, is a regional more valuable to you, or do you need to get your miners that you're already invested in started? Since you're going to invest anyway in another railway, what the hell? Does it matter? I'm going to be putting more money into the regional that I have, buying, say, 75% of it, 3 shares, or, which is, going to cost most of that money. Or is the 120 that I paid on one of these more important? And this is really tough, and I have to look for synergies here in terms of the tracks that I've got possible, in terms of, well, not this doesn't do shit for me, but in terms of, hey, what about these engineers? I get to block spaces with them. Rewind just a wee bit with this guy, back to this guy, who was actually the first, I think, of the concessions played. I didn't realize, hey, these are cities. So I'm going to place in Zaragoza itself, I believe, because that gets me to Madrid and it gets me down in here. That also gets me the $40 payout immediately. But I chose to start the Great Western Steamship Company, hey, the Great Western Railroad, over here in Liverpool. Now the problem with that, there's good things about it, which is I'm right in all that United Kingdom, rich territory there. The problem with that is I only paid 120 for this sucker. I got like 20 more bucks I have to pay. I only have 80 bucks left now after paying for the track rights bonus. I got 20 bucks I got to pay out of pocket for a 2+2 train. That's okay. I could have bid higher or whatever, but I've got to remember to save that money, and that may be kind of scary. I could end up screwing up and losing the company if I don't do that correctly. In 7th concession, the 6th was to buy the KSS company that runs up here near Berlin. Berlin is one of the really valuable cities. Problem, of course, with that is it's got track rights of 40. I'm going to be probably doing the same with the Green Junction Mercantile, which gets to get an extra bonus run. I'm thinking I kind of want to start that in Breslau. And if I have enough cash later on, I might be starting, say, the Vienna Railway there. Now, the 7th was triggering the Russian track rights with only $10 to put down here in Odessa. I actually came out ahead on that because there's no water cost to that. Although I wouldn't be paying that yet because I haven't built the track yet. And that puts us over to here. Sections 8 and 9 see a turn towards Italy with the Gray Locomotive Works being started down here, making some immediate money. Palermo had a $60 token on it. That seems pretty valuable. There's another $60 here, and somebody said, well, you know, I can hook that up fairly easily, and if I get a port authority, it's not that bad a run. So that may be goofy thinking, to tell you the truth, but it puts me close to Naples. Brindisi's not far away. Who knows? Anyhow, that was his thinking. He figures he'll buy 3 certificates in this and 2 certificates down in this sucker, which he doesn't think anybody's interested in but him. And he's got enough cash to do that at the $90 par. Actually, he could buy 3 certificates if he drops it down to 80 in the second one. And this looks like it's going to need less money, I think, overall. It's hard to tell. Yeah, but these are my guesses, and that's all I can say about it. We got one left, and it's a guy with a lot of options, a lot of miners open, and the totally weird mini option Barclay counter, which I don't know what the hell to do with. And then, you know, it could also start a new corporation, a new one of the regionals. The final concession was used to start an Austrian railway. Now this is kind of weird because that's not terribly in high demand. But the thing is, his companies kind of don't give any great advantage to being somewhere. In fact, these two have advantages to not being somewhere, which is to say this guy gives you extra track placements and this one gives you more trains, so you know you can kind of keep up with the big boys even if you're not in a really rich area by hitting an extra city and an extra location. Obviously they could be in better locations, but to me what I'm looking at is trying to dominate areas that other people aren't terribly going to be conflicting with me in. He's also got some, you know, the weird Barclay thing, which allows him to screw around with if other people are trying to play with his stocks or something. But he can also increase the par value of his stock. Now that's not very important at this point because he's only starting one company and he's starting it at the top of the realm. So I don't know what he's going to use that for, but whatever. Anyway, he's looking at a merger somewhere in this area where there's a lot of clear available. So that's what he's on. Now, priorities on player 2. Things are kind of getting tight already. Good thing I added another table. I don't even know if this is going to be enough. Priorities over on player 2, and he has his option between floating. He has to do one of these each time: floating a minor, floating a regional, purchase an already parred regional. Well, there aren't going to be any of those because we went through all the concessions, or removing a regional. Which I don't know how much advantage I see to that, but if you see, wow, I can't afford one, and that thing's going to be a competition to me, I could see removing it. Trading with players, which I'm probably not going to do. I'm trying to work with the packets that I built here. And then finally you can pass if you have no unfloated miners. This could all happen during the stock round, and we could get through to the end of this period, which is all 12 miners and 18 of the 24 regionals float. At that point, things would just crack, and we'd go onward. But it's also possible that everybody could pass during this, once all the miners are floated, and we could start doing an operating round. Kind of challenging because you know that most of these rails are going to float fairly soon. There was a lot of money out there, right? And you know all the miners are going to. This guy over here started things, well, he didn't start with his Orange Scroll Survivors or whatever. Instead, he started London and Northwestern because he's got this White Cliffs ferry, and he's kind of worried he's not going to get to use it. He could have started a Parisian, a route that's near Paris. However, I don't know, what's the Paris tile look like? Yeah, the Paris tile I wouldn't really be able to do much with right away. So this sucker, I should be at least able to get down into Lille and fight in with that. This guy over here has already started 2 regional rails. He's got enough money he could start a 3rd one. He can't invest in the 2 that he's started. So he's got kind of a weird situation here. Where if he doesn't start a new railway, he's just sort of sitting on that money until until we get out of this phase. And that's a lot of money to sit on. So I think I want to start something, but I don't know what to do. You know, in terms of synergy and such, not well. I can't remember which one does which. I think these 2 are the same. One allows you a free token in a port, and one allows you a free token in a non-port city. So I've got kind of this capability of breaking out of places. Now, one of the nice things was, hey, I can do this in the England area. This is the last remaining English railway, and it's pretty damn questionable in my view. I don't know if I want to pick that sucker up. It would have to be running, you know, to get into the rich stuff, it would have to be running across a port, and then even then, how valuable is it? And remember, the concession, the track rights for the United Kingdom are $40 each. However, where else do I go? They're $40 each over here in Germany, and there aren't any railways available that are really terribly useful to me there. You know, do I want to pick up one of these French railways and hope to try to link up in some way, or is there somewhere else that's just begging to have a railway started? This guy decided to start the BJV up here in Sweden. And like I said, there's some good cities up in Sweden. I gotta be careful. I'm always buying these railways and forgetting to give myself the president's shares. And that's okay at this point, but I do have to be a little bit careful as I go on, because it'll be harder to figure out what's going on. Then over here, he bought Saint-Etienne. It had a patronage tile, so my initial track light wasn't that expensive. I'm close to Paris, I'm close to a Y city. That sounds like a fair start to me. And this is the Mountain Peak Railway, which has the advantage of being able to get some discounts when blasting through the mountains. That sounds useful in the Alps. Maybe not so much for the miner when it first starts, but in the long run, I'm looking at maybe the PLM or something being my regional there, or possibly this. It's hard to tell. Anyhow, one thing you want to make sure of is that you have at least 1 or 2 of these regional lines, because otherwise you won't be able to run a real corporation. All you'll have is these miners. They can collapse into other things, but they don't turn into major companies. And you're pretty much dooming yourself to being an investor all game, which, you know, might be a reasonable strategy, but it's boring as shit. So that's one thought here. All right, priority moves over here. Right now, with the concessions done, we're just moving normal priority, doing a regular sort of stock round type thing, but under these special conditions still. I mentioned we've got a bit of a problem at this point. 2 French, 1 UK tile have been used. If I want to start my line here in Breslau, I've got to do it now, because the 3 track zones that you're only allowed to have 4 miners start in are Prussia, France, and the United Kingdom. And that was my plan, so I think I better trigger off the Green Junction Mercantile at this point. Things I don't like about playing with games where you have a lot of starting money, and this is usually the, in an 1830, it's like 4 players or less or whatever, is that you can float everything at 100 or whatever, the max is. And that's what we're seeing here, and that's what we saw in 18 EU. I don't know if the opposing strategy of trying to float things cheaper, get an extra share or whatever, or an extra company out of it, is actually better. But in general, I'm just kind of comfortable with this, and this seems to just automatically drop me to, yeah, I got $90, I can float it. I got $90. I think there's one person who's going to float one at 80, but for the most part, these are all going to be floated at a high value, and that's kind of troubling to me. I don't know how it is, to everyone else. Some people like, being able to control more with that more money. And those are the choices you really have is, do you create a good, stronger line? But if you try to create a decent, more lines, I've found that you go bankrupt in these kind of games. You run out of money too quickly. So it's generally best, to just, okay, I'll do what everybody else is doing and start my line rich. And then when you do that, it's sort of, it takes some of the flexibility of the system out of it. You no longer have quite the same, oh well, I bought a big miner or a big private, so now I can't afford to start a company at a high value. I could either start it down in the basement, maybe, or I bought a miner or a private in 1830. I might be able to start it in the basement, or I start it nowhere. This one forces you to bring all the companies out, though, which might create some interesting situations. And we'll see. We'll see if everything manages to float at high value. But certainly, everything that everybody wanted to float early is floating with a lot of money on it. Of course, as soon as I say something like that, I reverse or make a lie of it. MKV started at 80. This was kind of my plan, but I gotta pay stock train route right value for that. Forgot to do that. I'm not sure that I remember everything anyway. I may have made some screw ups. It's quite possible. I'll look at the cash that people have. So this guy looks like he has 180, and I think I probably forgot to pay his track rights too. Guy who had the London and Northwestern has the Orange Scroll Surveyors. Unfortunately for him, all the track rights in England and France are gone, which is where he'd kind of want to have taken things. Now he can start another corporation in France and try to link through that, but he can't build anything that has any synergy with the LWNR or whatever. So he started in Brindisi, which had some money available to it, and it is kind of a quick path into the Balkans, basically, one way or another. Now, that's an interesting location, and I'm not sure why it sat open so long, but whatever. But it does bring up a question of what he's going to do with his next company. He's got a few options that look kind of good. Probably the best is if he can get the Milan Railway here and try to link them up. But the thing is, the Orange Scroll guys, their bonus is breaking out of difficult locations, which is what it looked like the LWNR was in. So I may want to merge it into the LWNR, even though it's kind of not really any hope of using that track. We'll see. I have to look at the rules for, how the mergers work, but there's a possibility that could be of use. You don't necessarily want to merge something into its own track rights area. I kind of had hoped to make this a French company, so I would get French and English track rights or whatever in the same place for whatever value that is. Who knows? Maybe my corporations are going to end up as nationals anyway. To this guy who has plenty of companies, no money to start a new one, no miners to float. So now what he has to think of is, what, if anything, do I want to remove from the game? I can remove one company that I see as kind of a threat. Now, I have the Belgian, I have the GWR. I'm not really looking at this as too much of a threat, so I'm not going to remove that. And I have this Swedish-Danish stuff up here, or the Norwegian stuff. I'm sorry, Swedish railway. I think the biggest threat to me is Copenhagen. Or maybe that's the biggest opportunity. That's what's hard to tell. That's the problem with the game, is I can't really tell for sure whether something's a threat or an opportunity. I can't just remove track rights, which means a miner can pop up over there anyway. But I don't know how much of a problem a miner is if this is gone. The question, of course, is, would this be building track that, you know, I'd be happy to have built for me? And since this tile will never, I will always dominate that tile. I think no matter what it turns into, it's a one-dot tile. So maybe it's not such a big deal if I let them live. Maybe it's to my advantage to let them exist. I don't know. That's where things get kind of hairy here. I have pass-throughs, so I'm really not that worried about that aspect of things anyhow. So, do I remove the best railway that's left? Maybe that's my best option. What looks good that's left? What looks exciting to me? You know, if I take something like this away, I may be just giving bonuses to whoever's elsewhere. But I'll tell you, this is a metropolis. That's a worthwhile location. And I think that may be the best railway to remove. Kind of a, gosh, why wasn't that taken? Well, it's gone now. We came to somebody, 3 of these miners, one of which he hasn't figured out where he wants to put it yet. But France and Britain are used up. What might I want? I've got the F and H. I want this. The question is, how much money do I want it to have? I could start a big corporation with the 180 bucks on it, or a big regional. Or I have enough money that I could start 2 regionals for a lot less money. Gosh. Where's my other company? H is up here. I really don't know. I really don't know. I feel like having 2 corporations is something of a sine qua non towards winning the game, in the sense that, you know, I'm going to only be running 1 corporation if I only float 1 at this point. So I think I'll go with the 2. Which 2? Well, the PLM is pretty uninteresting to anyone else. The H, well, now I have these engineers which can, I'm not quite sure how to use them, but they can kind of block other people from using pieces of track. Kind of leaning towards going with the ooh here. Should be able to get to Nantes easily. I think I'll go with that. And kind of cheap too. Some weirdness. I had assumed this Munich tile here is an upgrade for Munich, but it's got these red bars along it. Now, one of the scenarios has a Munich red tile that gets placed. I'm going to have to keep looking. These are obviously, these are for the scenarios. I'm thinking that this may be that red tile, but I'm not positive. Otherwise, I'm not sure what it means. Those red bars look like, hey, cannot cross, but I don't remember a special rule about Munich that said anything along those lines for the regular scenario for the game. You need to push forward, and the companies are starting to start lower. I'm feeling a little bit better about the range of prices that are coming, just because people see, hey, you know, I can start 2 companies instead of 1. I could start 1 and have a pile of money is basically what it comes to, or 2. And clearly it seems better to have the 2. What did we have? This guy over here started that started a train in Russia, up in St. Petersburg. Now that it's open, I can do that. Now, that's a miner that I started there. I don't know how good a situation is. We're running into an ugly position for the miners because there aren't a lot of track rights available anymore. There's 1 Spanish track right, and the rest, Austria, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Well, the guy who's picking this has the 2 Austrian rails already. He's not all that interested in more Austrian rails. Although Salzburg is interesting, and that was a definite consideration, was grab that extra cash right now. Boom, boom, boom. But, you know, in terms of, again, how that would work out with other companies, not guaranteed to be useful to him. Priority here, I've got a bit of a problem. I've got enough money I could start 2 more of these regionals, but there are only 9 companies left. Now, if I start 1 of them, that drops it down to 8. 6 of them are spoken for, so that drops it down to 2. How many companies are other people going to start? He's going to start 1, and we've seen the money go where somebody else is going to start 1. So I think I only have the opportunity to start 1 more company. So I'll start it big, you know, rather than try to start it on a shoestring. Because let me make sure I got my count right. 1, 2, 3. Oh wait, 6 of them aren't accounted for. Only 5 are accounted for, which means that because there's 1 already dispatched, which means that right 9. He'll get rid of another one, but that doesn't really matter. So if I buy 1, it goes from 9 to 8. 5 remaining will be gone. That means there'll be 3 to pick up. Now this is one of the gone ones. He's going to kill another one, I'm sure. But there's 1 for sure. This guy's out of cash. He's not buying 1. Guy over here has enough cash, he's buying 1, and this guy and the next guy's buying 1. So yeah, we're not going to get a chance if I've got my count right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I do. And with an eye on a Grand Orient run, he's buying the PLM, which didn't look particularly attractive to anyone, but that gets me Paris into the Italian area, where I have my miner. It seems like a better option than trying to do something with this to get down there. And that's a railway somebody else thought, whoever owns F, this guy down here, thought was going to be safe. He's got to decide what to kill next. And it's kind of hard because whatever you kill, if it is in a good location, one of the miners is going to show up in it. Right, like we saw with St. Petersburg. Hey, bonus! Who started the PLM miscalculated. He thought the BHB, this fellow over here, had enough money for another railroad. He doesn't. I mean, look at how many he has running, right? So, he's already got 3. It's going to end up that we're going to start without moving into that next phase in the game. One of the companies is going to still be available for a while, which is a question. Hey, do you want priority or do you want to destroy companies more? Well, there's still a miner out here that hasn't been given track rights, a couple more up there, so I can safely get rid of another one of these regionals. But here's the thing. People are probably cut pretty close money-wise, and that means this guy may well, because he has excess money to a large extent, he may well be able to buy another one of the... this guy doesn't have 100, does he? He might be able to buy the next regional anyhow, even though he did what he did. So it may not be a big negative what he did. We'll see. We'll see how the cash ends up flowing. Yeah, I was saying to myself, well, yeah, I want to get rid of a rail, but I don't know if I really do. The ones I'd want to get rid of are these two Russian lines. I can't. There's already been a Russian line removed, which means I'm left to, I think, removing this English line or a Spanish line, neither of which do I particularly care about in any sense of the word. I'm kind of willing to leave either of them up there because maybe they're more attractive than the Russian line. Certainly the Spanish one doesn't look too bad. We'll see what other players choose here, but for this player at least, he's going to pass and take the priority kind of for real there. The sinking suspicion I may have screwed something up. No big shock. First of all, there are things like, hey, I found his money wasn't right. And now it is, I guess, but I don't know if some money shifted that shouldn't have. But, or maybe there's money under there that I don't see. It doesn't look like it. And this is 100, this is a 10. That's really disturbing. I cannot tell any difference between the color of the two whatsoever. I think is ridiculous. But they don't want you to use paper money. Don't fucking include it if you're going to do such a botched up job. I kind of like the small bills, actually. They're easier to manage. And honestly, I actually really like paper money better than at least full-size chips. Small chips might be okay. They'd have to be pretty small, though. So here's why I have this feeling. Because I have one more regional railway to float, and I am at 30. I'm at 28 companies. That means there's only 29. I have the feeling the intention is that there should be 30, and there's 2 track rights left. I don't think that's a big deal. That doesn't worry me. But I'm looking for... there we go. Shit. Yeah. So I got to figure out when he picked this up. Now, he picked this up, obviously, before he picked that up, but after the Great Western. So I'm looking at probably after his second. GWR, BJV, probably after the Belgian here is where it goes. Oh, I don't know about that. Did he have a concession? He did. See, I'm putting the wrong thought into mind. There were 10 concessions. So he's after those 10 concessions. Now, I thought, what did he start as his third? The BJV. So there should be 10 of these essentially started before that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think, but I don't know. I don't know when this was started. Crap. I'm going to have to go look back at the video, I guess. So some of my thinking was right there at least, which is that the BJV was actually the one that went right before it. It did not. This was not purchased by a concession, whichever one it is, the F here. So this went right after the BJV, which is much further along in the line, but not all the way at the end, which was the other option. Right then. Let me make sure that we're done. If we are, I think we'll load this one up and see. Okay, so this guy actually did not just kill a rail. And then we'll see whether or not what we want to do moving forward from there, because I don't think anybody's got an ability to start anything. Priorities here. He's the guy who's got the most cash, and is not that that's important in priority here. This uses a more standard priority than 18EU did with that. Was it 18EU or was it 44? I can't fucking remember anymore. But one of the two games used this. Oh yeah, I think it was 1844, where I got the most cash, so I get priority, which is weird. Okay, so this is probably going up.